climate change is accelerating. The melting of the polar ice caps is exceeding predictions that even came from a year or two ago. Within 30 years, 25% of all species are going to be extinct. Our civilization, as we've constructed it, is completely unsustainable. I mean, it's very confusing because we're in this affluent society. If you live in the modern world or in New York, you still have everything you could want. You know, the fish comes right to your plate and you can go and buy any fabric from any country in the world. It's very confusing to begin to read about the fact that there are these tremendous changes happening to the planet. What I began to come to in my research was this concept of time being really central to the whole crisis that we're in. And it's actually pretty interesting if you think about the metaphors we use when we talk about time. We talk about wasting time, spending time, having enough time, running out of time. Time is money. So we're constantly thinking about time as something spatial that's kind of ahead of us, that we can somehow reach out and grasp. And every time we try to grasp it, it's not there anymore. In a way, it's very ironic, because if you think about the whole purpose of creating an industrial civilization and learning how to do all this stuff with technology and machines, you'd think it would be that we could take it easy. But it's almost like some strange trick has been perpetrated upon us. The modern way of thinking about indigenous and tribal cultures is that they were myth-based and superstitious. And it may be that cultures like the Mayans and other indigenous cultures did have their own knowledge system that was as meaningful as ours, but they were just interested in very different aspects of reality, different aspects of being and experience. I started as a secular materialist person coming out of a whole Freudian, Newtonian, Cartesian paradigm. I began to accept that there was this whole dimension of the psyche that my world had negated and neglected to explore, even to think about. You can demonstrate quantitatively and statistically that the biosphere is in terrible shape. You can demonstrate qualitatively and statistically that our technology is continuing to accelerate and change our possibility. And this third aspect is about the psychic evolution. This is something that can't be quantified or understood statistically. So somebody who has just a rational scientific mind is going to find it very hard to accept that there's some kind of change happening in the nature of the psyche. In my own life and in the lives of many people that I'm connected with, there seems to be an incredible upsurge of synchronicities. So if you begin to have an intention about something, you can get a quicker level of manifestation. It's almost as if the boundary between the psychic and the physical is becoming thinner. It's becoming more permeable. It's becoming subtler. The thesis that I ended up developing in my book, and I'm continuing to develop in my writing, is that we're on the cusp of a breakthrough into a new form or new level of human consciousness. And the way that I've come to see this period leading up to 2012 is a kind of a window of opportunity to catalyze a transformation in global consciousness. We have a lot of fundamentalists in the US who are actually thinking about the rapture and Armageddon, but they're sort of seeing it in this very literalist and negativistic way. The apocalypse does actually literally mean revealing or uncovering. So rather than being destructive, it's a time when everything hidden becomes revealed and available. So this apocalyptic process would be the coming of the self into conscious realization. A lot of people, when they're confronted with this whole 2012 paradigm, they can lapse into kind of passivity. It's almost been like, oh, if you just trip, or you just get into the mind calendar, or every now and then participate in a shamanic session, you're going to be okay. You're going to be quote unquote saved when shit and fan meet each other. The way I look at it is totally different. I think that the shift is really about the individual taking responsibility for the whole planetary situation and actually reorienting their psychic energy towards the positive process of transformation. The philosopher Nietzsche talked about how the deed creates the doer, almost as an afterthought. So it's actually by dealing with the situation that humanity has unleashed on the planet that we create this next level of consciousness. And if we don't do that, I think we're going to be in very bad shape. How do we move towards a sustainable planetary civilization in a short period of time? And how do we make something positive and transformative out of it?
The Titanic has hit the iceberg and it's starting to sink. So our options are run around the deck screaming, "I protest," rearrange the deck chairs a little, or build the next boat, a solar-powered, wind-powered boat, party on deck, scantily clad people, drinks in their hand, dancing to cool music. You pull up alongside the Titanic, people are going to jump. Transnational corporations are not into local control. They come into your economy, your local economy, or your country only on the presupposition that they can take out more wealth than they put in. Otherwise, why would they do it? It's not a charity. It's a profit-making operation. That's an extractive model. It's a colonial model. They want to take away more wealth than they put in. If you say to people, should we subordinate the life cycle to the money cycle, or should we subordinate the money cycle to the life cycle, what are they going to say? So automatically from the grassroots you get these efforts to keep them out. Well, there's a political way to do that, and I'm arguing there's an economic way as well. Enterprise and corporate domination are two different things. Enterprise as a tactical technique for generating revenue. As long as you don't exploit people and don't exploit nature, there's nothing wrong with enterprise. So we're either going to concede it as a tool to the corporations and they'll use it to screw us in nature, or we'll take it and change it by making it a triple bottom line. Environmental restoration, social equity, and financial sustainability linked, synergizing, strengthening each other, not detracting from each other like a reservoir. You got to take from the financial to do that. No. You make the environmental and the social amp up the financial success. And then you use your surplus not to have a mansion and 8 cars and all this other bullshit, but to put it back into the movement, back into the revolution. Affordable housing for teachers and a green community development center with green retail, city offices around environmental stuff, education space, restaurant, clean tech incubator, all in one large commercial building. Subsidized rent for teachers allows us to train the trainers on site, and then they take that green education out into the school system. It's like software. The first one costs you $1 million. Each one after that costs you 10 cents. It's not exactly like that, but you take that learning from that first one. You go to local people. After we do San Francisco, we go to Oakland, Sacramento, Eureka, Santa Barbara, start with California, start rolling these buildings out, and then we go to a Google or Yahoo or an eBay and say, look, you got a great internet model, you don't have a real estate model. You need a real estate model. So we'll create the building where everybody knows that's the green economy building. All cities have unused property and they have trouble attracting and retaining teachers. The wages are here and the housing costs are here. So in San Francisco, we have teachers drive 2 hours to get to their school. They're tired when they get there. You give them a rent subsidy, you can remunerate them better with a rent subsidy than salary increase because the salary is taxed. You create a platform where it's affordable for you and him and her and all these different groups to come in, but it generates enough revenue to cover all the costs of it. And the infrastructure is pretty much invisible, right? It's taken care of. The garbage, the waste, the recycling, all that, it's so well organized that it runs almost like a mechanism. So you're solving a bunch of problems all at the same time with one building designed at super green, above platinum LEED level. You know, the mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah, it's a Republican state. Mayor of Salt Lake City, Rocky Anderson, comes to power, he goes, we're going to do sustainability. Trap the methane at the sewage plant and the solid waste treatment plant and use that methane to power generators that provide the electricity for that facility. switch out all the traffic lights with the LED lights, change all the vehicles, change all the light bulbs, insulate the buildings, green, you pass laws that say any new buildings have to be at these green standards. Mayors can do that. And it doesn't get on the corporate media, ABC, CNN, CBS, because who's their advertisers? Where are they getting? They're getting their money from the big auto companies and ExxonMobil and all. They don't want to see some alternative economy garbage at the local level, local control. We have the facts on our side, and we have moral authority on our side. We're the ones that want to feed all the children and have no homelessness. The other side, they have guns and money. They have the monopoly of power with guns and money. Okay, so I'm God and I'm dealing out the cards to you, and you can either have facts and moral authority or guns and money. Which are you going to take? You're going to take facts and moral authority because that's truth.
The 60s had this emergence of the psychedelics linked with a lot of social justice movements, anti-war movement, women's rights, environmental rights. There was a sense, though, that at the time, the core elements of human experience were really not well accepted, so that birth was medicalized and women were tranquilized and men were not allowed in the delivery room. Death was something that you didn't talk about. Yoga was something that was nuts. If you did yoga, you were totally weird. These were kind of the basics when psychedelics started coming up and people started describing all of these experiences. Not only was it part of the social justice movement, but the core of the experiences were difficult for our culture to handle. What psychedelics can do, if incorporated into medicine, is have remarkable ability to help people deal with trauma, with relationships, for couples counseling, with confrontation with death, more tolerance, more acceptance of diversity, more search for common ground, ability to work through dialogue rather than through war. Patience is the fastest way. If you push too fast, if you're impatient, you're not going to get where you want to go. You're going to get people nervous. So if you are complacent and too patient, then that's destructive also. Moving at the speed that you can, bringing people along at the speed that they're willing to go, that's actually the fastest way. You go too fast, there's a counter reaction. And there's also times where there's this sort of tipping phenomena, so that people can be working for 100 years to try to stop slavery, or 100 years to let women vote. And it seems like they're not making much progress. But then they reach this tipping point. Enough people have been educated, then before you know it, within a few years, things flip around. We want to think we're at this tipping point, and we want to think change is right around the corner. So the point is, would we do anything differently? Are we or aren't we? We still have the same choices. Are we going to try to work in the ways that we think are most effective? I wish and hope that this tipping point is near. I can't really say. I thought that we would have changed global policies a long time ago, that people would have seen the bankruptcy of prohibition, the necessity for altered states and spiritual experiences. But I think that there is openings that I've not seen in a very long time. I think we are living in crucial times. There's no doubt about that. Whatever the Mayan calendar happens to say or not say is irrelevant. You look around, we're living in crucial times. I think one thing that concerns me is, again, this making something too concrete. That there's going to be this transformation of consciousness, this fundamental split between where we've been before and this new consciousness, and 2012 is marking this division line. I used to joke with Terence McKenna that if he really believed that 2012 was going to be the end of things, that he should take out all these long-term balloon mortgages that he has to pay in 2013. At the end of the day, it's like, what are we going to do today? And is there going to be a change if it ends into 2012 or not? Would I do anything different now? We have the tools that we need to make this a better world. We have to find ways to use them. And that there are people in all generations that want to help. So the solutions are there. It's not too late. And the tools that can promote radical transformation, that can promote less dependence on fossil fuels, all these different ways, the tools are there. And the necessity is for people to be willing to take a risk of optimism, to be willing to try, to be willing to hope. And that if you give up without that, you've lost. If you try, you've won, even if you don't succeed. And I think that's the other big message. It's the effort that really matters. Maybe we won't be able to save the planet. Maybe the global warming will happen and everything will change and it'll be bad for us and species will die. Maybe we won't. But that doesn't really matter. The joy is in the struggle. The joy is in the trying to make it happen. So you don't have to believe that it will work. I think that's the first thing is it doesn't, you just have to believe there's a chance.
I set out in high school to become what Buckminster Fuller called a design scientist. And undergraduate, I divided my time between sort of pure science and architecture studio. I look at the system as it stands as accelerating towards crises by itself on multiple fronts. And whether this will be, whether this is a cause for optimism or the opposite, I wouldn't want to say. I think it's actually a necessary part of what we have to traverse to go to, a future for the world. If you think about what happens at the moment that one's personal birth chart is imprinted, it's that moment of the first breath, but it's also that moment where you've come through the birth canal and you've basically had this confrontation with death. The full biological terror of not being able to breathe as you're born and having to take that first breath. It may be that the way we cross that transition can only be through some sort of near-death experience. And that the world basically is determined to go there. Because it certainly looks, when I look around, as if we keep having these forks in the road, like there's the rational way that we could go and we'd sort of smoothly get there, and there's the way that leads towards crisis. We're like, ooh, crisis, let's go there. And, on all fronts, we seem to be just determined to accelerate towards the wall. The myth we need to tell people has to be a material myth, because right now the culture is so locked into imagining that we're in a material world that unless you tell the culture a plausible story about matter, they won't believe it. They can't take in the psychic message of it. And so that's thrown me back into chemistry and thermodynamics and physics and making gasifiers. In order to build the plant is taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. And so the plant has a lot of stored carbon in it. But in most biomass energy approaches, when you burn that carbon, all of that carbon goes back in the air, which is carbon neutral. At least it's not making the situation worse. It's not like taking fossil carbon out of coal and putting it in the air. But by making charcoal and putting it back in the ground, we're not just carbon neutral, we're carbon negative. We're actually reversing climate change by taking about 20% of the carbon that was in the plant and locking it up in the ground. And the charcoal has all of the minerals that were in the plants. And when we do this, the soil becomes more fertile, it becomes able to hold more water, it becomes more drought resistant. A gasifier is a device that makes gas out of solid, basically. You're breaking down the carbohydrates into hydrogen gas and carbon monoxide. And so if you oxidize hydrogen, you get water. If you oxidize carbon monoxide, you get CO2. And so if you run that gas into an engine, you can ignite it with a spark and run a regular piston engine. When life first emerged on this planet, it emerged out of the soup and it ate the soup. And it pretty much ate the soup until it was gone. At which point there was the first energy crisis. And, we had to evolve photosynthesis in a hurry. And, against all odds, we did it. We ate sunlight. Then we merrily went along eating sunlight and throwing off oxygen until we had rusted all of the rock in the whole lithosphere, buffered it for hundreds of millions of years. And the oxygen level went up so much that life was spontaneously combusting. And that was the first climate crisis. And both that energy crisis and that climate crisis make our current one look like nothing. And the intelligence that caused the system to jump to the next level is just as mysterious then as it is now. The only difference is that now, as far as we can tell, for the first time, we have these marginally self-aware life forms where we're sort of participating in the awareness of what's going on. And maybe we actually have this responsibility to sort of bootstrap the thing into being. It's as if up until now it's been completely on autopilot, now it's only half on autopilot. And so I still have a lot of faith in the half, and I also have a great sense of urgency that it's our responsibility to get good at it.
This is one of those areas where basically everyone is interested in it. All scientists, non-scientists, when presented with the idea, the possibility of mind-to-mind communication, of precognition, these kinds of ideas, who cannot be interested in this? So what's different in my career is that, unlike a lot of scientists who get interested in it but then are turned off by the relationship between these kinds of so-called paranormal phenomena and its relationship to entertainment, science doesn't like to be too closely associated with that because it raises questions about credibility. But I always found that these phenomena were more interesting than problems with credibility. So I worked in conventional science for about 10 years and as a hobby was conducting experiments to see whether some of these things might be true. It probably took about 5 years before I convinced myself that there was something real going on. But once I was convinced, it became the kind of topic that you can't set aside because holy smoke. The first series of studies that I did were at Bell Laboratories, and they all involved the relationship between mind and matter. And they were stimulated by a laboratory lore, which is formalized in the terms of Murphy's Law, which is that if anything can go wrong, it will, and usually at the worst possible time. Now, when I was working in Bell Labs, this is part of the Bell system back then, if one of the big switching machines went down, the telephone traffic machines, if it went down for a second, you'd lose $1 million of revenue. That's why they use triple redundant machines to prevent that. And those machines would go down too. So there's a lot of effort to see what causes a triply redundant machine to fail and how can we stop it. When you go through this long list of reasons, you end up with maybe a 1% left over, which nobody knows. They don't know why it fails. Even the human factors are taken out and it still fails. So I'm attracted to the residue because it says whatever that is something that we don't understand yet. Maybe it's interesting. So I knew from the literature of parapsychology that people were doing experiments involving the effect of intention on random events. Intention would apparently cause order to appear where it shouldn't be. So I started doing experiments on that at Bell Labs, on myself and my colleagues, and we got results that confirmed what we had read in the literature, that the randomness went away. So, of course, this was the first hook, and it took a while for me to believe that it was really true. And then I started going to conferences and presenting this kind of work and so on, and I caught the attention of people in the U.S. government who were doing this kind of research, at the time secret research. And a few years later, I was invited to participate in that program. People were taking very seriously the idea that these strange psychic effects were real, and studying it now on the context of big science, meaning well-trained, conventionally trained academics from a wide variety of disciplines in a real science shop. The people who were funding this were the Defense Intelligence and Central Intelligence and a huge, long list of usually three-letter names. So at one time in the U.S. we had a ballistic missile program where you'd put missiles on train tracks and you keep moving them all the time with the idea that you'd fool the enemy so that they couldn't bomb the silo because there is no silo, it's moving. So they want to know, in that context, could you outguess where the train is going to be? If the government were some sort of an entity that we can consider as rational, then it is true that it would be very likely that there would be programs, active programs, looking at applications of psychic phenomena. But I think there's every indication that we know historically in the present as well that government does not act rationally. Government tends to be reactive, not anticipatory, and it doesn't often make decisions which are in its best interest or even the right technical decisions. And of course this is true even in industry. Oftentimes in industry where money was at stake, if you made the right decision or not, the technical people would be asked to make the best technical decision they could, and it would be overridden for some kind of political reason. So this is not rational. It's something else. We now know that around the time that the U.S. had its secret program, that the Russians had its own secret program. And to this day, the Chinese probably have a program, and who knows who else. So part of the fear in any kind of race, any military race, is that the others are ahead of you, so it keeps pushing you to go ahead. Now we're beginning to understand that nobody knows what's going on. Well, one way to understand the taboo is, like any taboo, it's designed to maintain a certain social stability. That's what the taboo is about. To create a public illusion, an agreement, that we simply won't talk about this because if we talk about it, it will destabilize something. So what would be destabilized here? What would be destabilized if, let's say, just take something like telepathy, for example. If everyone suddenly agreed that telepathy is real, it would probably destabilize everything we know about law, about government secrets, about our own secret thoughts. If we all admitted that telepathy were true, then, well, we don't have any secrets, really. We're connected in ways that are far more fluid than anyone would like to admit. I think this taboo goes through cycles. There were cycles in the 1970s where it became much more open. It was closer to the surface and less taboo to talk about. And then in the 90s, it dipped in the other direction, and the taboo was stronger. So the question is it a linear trend? Probably not. It's some kind of cycle. Is a cycle going up, meaning towards more openness? I would say yes. I would say it's not, that cycle is not occurring as a result of better evidence, even though we do have much better evidence now than we used to, but rather because science in general is going in a direction which is becoming more and more compatible with the idea that these things might be true. In other words, it's the theoretical and empirical advancements in the rest of science are making it more and more plausible that what used to be called this piece of the paranormal is becoming normalized. So we can imagine maybe 300 years ago or something like that, when electricity was just first being not really understood but used for things. It tended to be very erratic, it tended to be weak. There are many, many variables that influenced the ability to get like a static effect. So they didn't know that humidity made a difference, for example, or that the material that one material rubbing against another, that made a difference. They had to discover those empirically. But nevertheless, they were able to show that there were some effects, and it gave rise to enough repeatability so that now we have big power grids all over the place. So where we are right now for psychic effects is roughly like rubbing amber. We know under the right conditions that you rub amber a certain way and you can get sort of weak, repeatable effects. But what may be different here, though, is, and we don't really know if this is true or not, but what may be different is that there might be an inherent limitation to some psychic effects. So if I do an experiment involving intention into the world, and the world says, oh, no, you don't, maybe that cancels it. You see, so unless you have a very coherent collective mind that is all intending in the same direction, maybe it's a wash. And I think there's even some evidence to suggest that is true. that there's something like collective mind, which would include collective intention effects and maybe collective perceptual effects as well. So one scenario is that there, just with it by analogy to weak electrical effects that have turned into the major power grids, maybe now we're working with weak psychic effects that will later turn into some equivalent power grid. So what's a psychic power grid? One scenario is it would become something like a hive mind, a giant global mind, perhaps. And at that level, I don't know what the nature of intention and perception and all the rest might be. It's too big almost to imagine. And then there's other scenarios where it turns out that with the right forms of amplification, perhaps, we might be able to create the equivalent of super psychics. Maybe permanently, maybe for short periods, it's hard to say. But there may also be like a third scenario where it limits itself. Let's say, for example, we create a system where day traders can become slightly precognitive. So whoever figures that out first is going to become real rich real quickly. But other people will figure it out later. And once you have a whole bunch of people playing the same game, that they're all being precognitive, you end up with this sort of a probabilistic mush where no one can outguess anybody else because they're all pushing the future around. The quantum Zeno effect says that if you are rapidly looking at a quantum system, you freeze it. You can't allow it to evolve. Well, maybe that would happen in a larger sense. We're precognitively looking at our futures and causing it to freeze because of all of this observation. Maybe the future can't occur, in which case time stops. Now, these are science fiction scenarios, but at the level of very large-scale, strongly functioning psychic abilities, it's very difficult to outguess what's going to happen.
The model I use is a spiral of development. So at the beginning, we were, like all of our animal brothers, natural, integrated, whole, happy, peaceful, healthy. But unfortunately, without what we have today in modern society, human beings had an average lifespan of about 30 years. You'd die of an infection or something else. And so because we didn't want to be, happy and whole, but shivering in the rain in the trees, we created houses and industry, and we used our eye, frontal lobe, finger complex. Those three go together to change the world and to build what we see in society. Unfortunately, the price that was paid is the devil's bargain. It's a split from nature into intellect. And it's been very, very successful in terms of being adaptive, in terms of increasing our lifespan. So now we live to be 80, but we're separate from nature. We've broken from nature. And there's a hunger and a lack of groundedness, a lack of stability. So do we come back down the spiral to primitivism? I believe not. Bin Laden and Kaczynski, the Unabomber, asked us to do that. But I think, no, we go forward. We power through our problems, around the curve, back around, to a position of neo-tribalism or neo-pastoralism, where we're back integrated with nature, but eyes open, Buddhist style this time. So we've matured, we've come up one level, but we've gotten back to our tribal roots and our animal nature. Until society changes in that wondrous way and we're neo-pastoralists again, this world is diametrically opposed to the natural world. So, we struggle with that. I struggle with that, to be an American, to be a modern person, and yet to recognize that my roots and my health lie in my animal nature, in my groundedness. So what do? You try to balance things. You try to compromise. Yes, we all do that. Many of us do that, I should say. Some of us decide to leave. They get back to nature, like the hippies did in the 60s. They went to communes. It wasn't just because they were antisocial. They did it for this very reason. They wanted to be surrounded by a healthful, whole, grounded kind of an environment. Most of us can't afford to do that, both literally and emotionally. We've got family, we've got friends, we've got history, our definition of ourselves. It's very hard to do that. So, unfortunately, we're in the midst of the birth pains, the growth pains. And it's not easy for us. I don't think there's an easy solution for us as individuals living in urban or modern settings. I think we all have to balance our lives. It's difficult to imagine many Westerners going off and living in a cave and meditating for 10 years. Some do it, most don't. Over time, however, I think society as a whole will. This duality we have is really part of the problem. This idea of modernity or tribalism, primitivism it's called, or mind-body, or matter and energy. In physics we know matter and energy really are the same thing. We know a particle and a wave can be called a wavicle. It's one thing. And so to me, this duality between spirituality and science, as good an example of any of this duality, is spurious. Because, for me, science, if you look at quantum mechanics and cosmology, those are counterintuitive sciences. Those are magical, spiritual sciences. They're science, but they have a non-Newtonian, non-linear nature to them that's in keeping with what we think of as spirituality. So science is spiritual. Spelled with a small s, though. I don't want to make it a big, super thing. And spirituality is natural as breathing or going to the bathroom. It's a bodily function. It's organismic. And so ultimately, if you make science sort of spiritual and you make spirituality natural, then what have you got? You've got one thing. You've got our organisms, which are built on something physical, but are in touch with, integrated with, the entire subtle substrate world. I think you can change society just like we can change ourselves. Maybe not completely, maybe not in a day and night, black and white kind of a way, but yes, over time. And I think so efforts to change are important. But ultimately, I think change happens over generations, over time. And that, I'm a long-term optimist, and I think we all have to be short-term pessimists right now, but I don't get depressed about my pessimism. It's motivating to try to help things change.
My big teachers when I was growing up were people like Abby Hoffman and Allen Ginsberg. These were family friends. And one thing that I really learned from them when I was a kid was how important it is to use culture and to use connection through community to change people's heads so that they can connect with each other and make change. Douglas Engelbart, who is really the great genius that every American school kid ought to know about, who invented the personal computer and the way that you use it back in the early 50s. His initial vision behind all of these tools was, he didn't do it to get rich. He didn't do it because, he wanted to be the biggest businessman on the planet. He did it to really help make the world a better place. And the way that he phrased it, how can I help the world collectively solve complex problems? He started thinking, I don't need a computer to answer questions I can't answer. I need a computer to help me collaborate with other people, and we can collectively answer questions. And he got a vision in the early 1950s of somebody sitting at a desk with a screen and a keyboard and a wire going out the back of that screen, connected to the same kind of device somewhere else, and two people manipulating symbols on these screens, and they're collaborating. And they're using computers to communicate and to share information. And essentially, this was the beginning of the whole idea of distributed online networks. One of the most amazing things about the internet is that it's a distributed network. It's not a centralized hub where all the information is held at the center and you sort of stuck at the end dealing with the center, trying to find out what's going on. Instead, it's more like a mesh. And what that allows for is a way of information flowing to the edges so that power doesn't concentrate in the center. The old media paradigm, essentially the broadcast model, was, every day something happens in the world, it's news, it gets gathered at the office of the newspaper or of the television station, and it gets broadcast out, because a handful of people basically decide what's important and want to tell the rest of the world what's important. This new model, this distributed media model, enables anybody in the mesh network basically to see something that's important that's going on and get it out to everybody else in the network. What it also allows for, if you design digital identity technology, is for everybody in the network who share certain interests to find each other, connect, and then self-organize. What we're really missing right now is the opportunity for us to very easily find one another and the information and ideas and entertainment that would be most valuable to us, so that we can self-organize. Back in the 60s, that kind of connection happened in happenings, in parties, in the park, right? But for various reasons now, people are much more kind of isolated in their own kind of universe, and they're using the internet to sort of to connect with each other. The problem is that the way that they're connecting with each other through places like Facebook and MySpace is, within these, what they call a walled garden, within these silos that are controlled by corporate interests. And the only way that you can express yourself within Facebook or MySpace is using personas that are created through these tools that are designed in order to make other people money. The whole thing is designed around the business culture and the business structure, and not really around, who you are and how you can best express yourself. And then one of the most exciting things that I think is going on is a project I'm doing with Daniel Pinchbeck. It's called Reality Sandwich. It's part of a larger network that's called Evolver, which we're just starting to roll out as an online social network. And what we want to do is embody the values and the visions of the transformational community around the planet that you see, from Burning Man to serious yoga and bodywork practitioners, to radical environmentalists, to people in festival culture who really understand our connection to the planet, and enable these people to connect with each other to catalyze what is really a growing global movement. So that's going to start with people basically being able to own their own information on our site. But we also want you to take your profile from Evolver with you wherever you go on the internet. When you give people the opportunity to really express their heart, and to and when folks start to really say what it is that is the truest deep down, and other people can see that and share it, that's when revolution happens.
I'm currently the president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is an organization that looks at the whole bandwidth of consciousness and where the frontiers of change are, and where worldview is collapsing and where it's reforming. And I came to that place from my own journey, which was through war and human rights abuse, and 10 years as the director of Amnesty International's office in Washington. The Institute was founded by Edgar Mitchell, who was the 6th man to walk on the moon, and on his way back to Earth and seeing Earth and feeling the spin of the capsule, that he began to enter a deep state of connectivity where he said he felt the molecules of his own body beginning to resonate with everything around him, so that he could feel no lines of separation. And so he really, as an MIT-trained scientist himself, wanted to look at, then back with his feet firmly on planet Earth, the connection between those different modalities of knowing, those different ways of knowing. That synthesis, I think, has driven the organization and has placed us at this point where that's a big conversation here on planet Earth. How do we bring together these subjective, deeply informed subjectivity? We can even talk about subjectivity in that way now. Deeply informed subjectivity with deeply informed rationality and so-called objectivity. how do you break into that conversation? It looked at, well, maybe the way is through anomalies. What are the anomalous areas where there are just little tears in the fabric of our mapping? And so one was, well, this whole area when people are dying with devastating diseases, why is it some of them just stop dying and their disease arrests itself and they go into total remission? What's that? And so we collected the research. We still have, an update, the world's largest bibliography on the remission of disease, because that in itself has informed people. It really sort of brought in that whole territory of psycho-neuroimmunology that became popularly, the mind-body connection, mind-body health. Once you begin to look at health and healing and the transformation, how can you look at a healthy person in a sick society? You begin to see that the relationships, the web of connections that are integral, that affect both the personal and the collective. And I think we're at a very vivid moment in seeing a lot of spiritual awakening, a lot of transformational ideas, which we have also looked at and studied in many ways. And yet, we haven't reached the lock-on of that awareness finding its modality into systemic transformation. Yeah, we're at a point where it's no longer local collapse, and we know that. Now that's somehow at a global scale. And it still seems to be gathering in some ways, and it's gathering around of thinking that is overly rigid, materialistic, concretized, and that's good news. It's really good news. It just so happens that it will be, and it continues to be, extremely painful news. I'm one of those people who's had to spend much of their life thinking about that relationship between pain and suffering and massive violation, massive trauma in the human system and the human psyche. And yet, what comes out of that? What comes through? Right at the end of the Holocaust and the Second World War, you have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, an attempt to say there's something in the nature of law that can lift us. And you had a whole series of movements then of the beginning of these commissions and reports and truth commissions. So you begin to see emerging something quite new that summarizes itself in truth, reconciliation, and forgiveness. I've come to the conscious movement part of it as a way of trying to synthesize my own life's journey through the places of hell and torture and wounding on the planet to the possibilities that we can, in fact, and will, in fact, triumph.
My name is Abraham. Went to the University of California, and it was kind of a womb for birthing out into the world, which later on it led me to Israel. And I have a kind of a view of things, an understanding of things, and I've had some awesome teachers. And that's where I'm holding right now, is to share some of that stuff. Basically, it's a world of choice. Like, we really believe that that we've been put here in order to be able to choose the light. Right? It's like, what direction are we going in? Are we the ones who are going towards the light or trying to go away from the light? And it's not like this club, there's only a few people, it's anybody who wants the light, no matter where you're holding. That's it, that joins us all. The more that the light gets better PR, and people understand, like, wow, like, who would want to fight against this? It includes all of us, it's a win-win. So the Torah teaching in the Kabbalah It's there is how to bring every teaching on the planet to its fullness. No negation of any teaching, of any myth, of any religion, and then to join in the tree of life. The tree of life is a concept of 10 sphirot. We are a spherotic pattern. This is a human pattern. This is the head and this is the body. God diminishes his light at successive stages. That's why the circles get smaller, right? In order to create a world where what we do has significance. Like we have to become accountable at this lower level here, or we create our own hell, or we can actually bring heaven down into earth. It's not going to come down from anywhere. We're going to reveal that heaven was here the whole time. The temple, the tree of life, and the human body, and this pattern of the universes are all one thing. You go up here through the gate, and you go up the pathway up to the mountain, into the palace at the top of the mountain, and you enter into the Holy of Holies of the palace, and you access these two higher levels. That's one way of looking at it. You go up into the spiritual experience in order to come back down with that into here, because this is where we live. The other way is that this is literally corresponding to the human body. This is like our head, this is like our shoulders, this is like our body, our torso, this is like our pelvis and our legs. The verb form behind this is the word being. God is not a being, God is being. And therefore God doesn't change, even though everything in the world is changing constantly. It's all part of this incredible drama that God created for you and me. The whole prayer system of Judaism is to go up from here, to connect to here, to go into a state of Ein in Hebrew. Ein, nothingness, no thingness, to beyond my ego, beyond anything I think I know. And then come back down with that each time. I start here, I go up here, I bring something down, I internalize it, I own it, I try and love it, I try and be it, and now I'm able to share it. And then I come back here. Every country in the world, there's political unrest. In a sense, it's really the pus of all the wrongs is coming out. And in a sense, that's good. All the manipulation and all the demagoguery that people have done behind the scenes, it's all coming out. It hurts very much to see that the human experiment is coming to such an end. The ideal thing was that we were supposed to transform the planet with those very, very powers in a positive sense, right? How many of us will make it through this stage right now in our physical bodies? I love my body, and I love my family, and I love my kids, and I love my friends, and I love my people, and I love mankind. Because the more I learned about this stuff, the more I understood that I could love everybody. And so I want us to come together on that, all of us who really care about that, and to make the difference.
I live in a community in the middle of the jungle in a preservation area. We are there for spirituality. It's an intentional community that gathered there to develop spirituality and using the sacrament, the Amazonian sacrament that come from indigenous people.
I would say my main 3 lines of work is, first of all, scientific. I publish books, I edit, I write. Then I have also my political side, like my activism, that I am an anti-prohibitionist activist, and I like to promote discussions and reflections on the drug war. And also I have my spiritual side, my spiritual activities, that I'm very personally related to this plants that some people call teacher plants, or there's diverse ways to call it. Santo Daime was founded by Mestre Ineu in the 30s in the Amazon. He's an Afro-Brazilian man that migrated from the Northeast to the Amazon.
He received from an indigenous old healer this holy sacrament. And this man gave him this. He knew what he was doing. Because Master knew he had this mission. He discovered when he drank this who he was. He had that mission to open this for the world. We have a vine and a shrub.
The vine is masculine and the leaf is feminine.
They need to come together. And to prepare this medicine, they need to lose their original shape. We have to smash the vine and the leaves. They are cooked. Everything is cooked. They come from the earth. We need fire, we need water, we need air for this to become something else. That is this global principle of awakeness.
I think there are many benefits to using these plants, but as I said before, I think that's different for each person. So I can give my own testimony that I feel a lot more of inner peace and comprehension of the world by this plant.
We do a lot of cleansing about several deaths. we have to die several times.
Peya is like, getting like punished by the plant if you did something that you deserve it probably, and then that might reflect in a lot of vomiting or bad experiences, which is understood as a cleansing, so not necessarily as something bad for you, but kind of like a medicine. Maybe it doesn't taste good, but it's good for you.
It brings us a lot of awareness and reminding of prophecies. So we kind of breaks this limit of time and space, You go to the spiritual level.
I have learned a great deal of myself and of the world doing these plants. Actually, I don't know how I would classify and understand myself without these plants now. I consider that I am one with it.
And the sacred medicine is teaching us a lot about ourselves, who we are.
And I think it all for urban people, it opens up a little bit ecological consciousness, awareness of nature, that it's not so external to you, that you're part of it.
We are here, we came to this earth, but most of the humanity, they don't know what they are doing here. They're lost, they are around, they are fighting, and they don't pay attention to what are they doing in this world.
Devastation and loss of identity, and this commodification of reality, and this consumerism, mad consumerism, this lack of interest in other cultures.
I see young people, even when they drink something that comes from the nature that can expand consciousness, it may become a drug because it's without consciousness. Young people don't pay attention to this old world. You don't fit there. Don't feel you are excluded of the creation because you don't fit in those old structures of war and money and competition. This is not good for the life. So, young people, you have the world in your hands.
through the situation, my son. This is serious as cancer, all fun and done. Dumbed down corporate media is eating your mind. Try to tell you what to think in these postmodern times. I'm like Prop Anonymous, the catalyst for one hand clapping. Tell you what is happening with a rap score on a nap. Trees falling in the forest, the Eggman and the walrus on a warpath for oil, and the moral is the chorus of a mother warning all of us. Extinction of the honeybees, nothing to pull our rice caps. In 30 years or less, you won't be able to fold our life after. Damn right, I'm back. I'm human-handed up the hair, cause some humans are assuming it's so cool to drive an SUV to supermarket soccer games and through the city streets. Now we're down to the beast of Babylon on our fuse. Global climate change is coming, it's an inconvenient trope.
Waiting to essentials, time, second mental. Integrate Earth, recognize potential.
The crisis breeds opportunity.
Are you waiting to be stable when you make yourself free? Waiting to essentials, time, second mental. Integrate Earth, recognize potential.
Crisis breeds opportunity.
Are you waiting to be stable when you make yourself free? We all suspended in this one moment, a movement spiraling in fractal design. But your mind caught up in linear time. You're too afraid to let go, so you're always trying to catch up with time. This is a new consciousness, which means a new experience, cause it's perception of reality that enslaves us. It's not about the past, the future, it's about presence. If you're living in the now, you can help save us. You talk about time like it's an object to hold. Tell yourself you're running out of time. The time is equal to gold, but you never get a grasp of it though. Cause time is just a concept, bro. You let yourself get passively pulled along with the flow. Won't respect the wisdom of the ages just because it happened long ago. The apocalypse is coming, it's inevitable. Look it up and exhale, the lifting of the veil.
Double the chances of keeping you right there, but triple the odds of having all of the world connect on one frequency, interact frequently. 4 scores ago, man, romance the thought of technology, allowing us to be free, so we'd have time to tell it on the mountain, and simultaneously see it on TV. From NY to Tel Aviv, television talk is the information of monitors in front of teleprompters, telling us the problems, causes, and ways to solve them. Bonding broken words with interaction and involvement, saving us one touch at a time. Unity moving the minds together divine. So let's take the past intentions, connected intellect with media and internet to approach a better mental set.
Waiting to essentials, time, second mental. Integrate Earth, recognize potential.
Crisis breeds opportunity.
Are you waiting to be stable when you make yourself free? Waiting to essentials, time, second mental. Integrate Earth, recognize potential.
Crisis breeds opportunity.
Are you waiting to be stable when you make yourself free?
Releasing the power of mind energy, hitting the sign to see what to veer near, what to steer clear. Living on the prayer, but being there instead of just leaving it for God's to fix. It's such a sentence, flip the switch, illumination, gear our minds for transformation. The future of the mind permeating, open the gate. It's for the water of daughters of sons of daughters. Why let history make us monsters ponder the hour upon the court, the power of conscious thought. So possible, I bet we can affect the game, the cost. I bet the future's not lost, yeah. I think negating the physical debt. Why are we waiting? It's not gone yet. When will we get it? Writing here, the page, the station, yeah. Permeating, open the gate, see the order.
Crisis breeds opportunity.
Are you waiting to be stable when you make yourself free? Waiting to essentials, time, second mental. Integrate Earth, recognize potential.
Crisis breeds opportunity.
Are you waiting to be stable when you make yourself free?